The night he went on that blind date, he believed he was walking toward a small chance at happiness, unaware that the path ahead was about to collapse and rebuild his entire life in a way no romance ever could. The city lights reflected off wet pavement as he stood outside the quiet cafe, phone in hand, heart tight with a nervous hope he hadn't felt in years. He had shaved carefully, ironed the only decent shirt he owned, and rehearsed polite smiles in the mirror because loneliness had finally exhausted him. Every minute stretched longer than the last as the chairs inside filled and emptied, but the seat across from him remained painfully vacant. With each unanswered message and each glance at the door, disappointment settled deeper, reminding him how easily people disappeared when life became inconvenient. He waited far longer than pride allowed, long enough for the staff to begin stacking chairs and dimming lights, long enough for the realization to arrive quietly and cruelly that the date was never coming. The rejection did not arrive with anger or drama. It came like a slow leak, draining the fragile belief that he was still worthy of being chosen. He paid for the untouched coffee and stepped back into the cold evening, shoulders heavy, mind louder than the traffic rushing past him. He told himself that this was simply how things went now, that expectations were mistakes, and that hope only delayed disappointment. Before the story continues, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen blessings, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are quietly breaking. He walked without direction, letting the city decide where his feet would land, passing closed shops and flickering streetlights that mirrored the tired pulse inside his chest. Memories rose uninvited, years of working overtime, missed family gatherings, and a life slowly narrowed to survival instead of meaning. He had not always been this man. Once he dreamed of a family, of laughter filling a small apartment, of being needed. Somewhere between loss and responsibility, that dream had faded into something he barely recognized. Near a dim bus stop, something interrupted his thoughts, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to slow him down. A woman sat on the bench with a small child curled against her side, both wrapped in coats too thin for the night. The child slept fitfully, face pale, breath shallow, while the woman stared forward with the kind of stillness that only comes from exhaustion beyond tears. He tried to look away, reminding himself that pain existed everywhere and that he was in no condition to carry anyone else's burden, but his feet refused to move on. He lingered at a distance, pretending to check his phone, yet watching closely as the woman adjusted the child's position with careful hands. There was no sign of panic, only quiet endurance, the kind learned when asking for help has failed too many times. Minutes passed, buses came and went, no one stopped. The night grew colder. Eventually, concern overpowered hesitation. He approached slowly, keeping his voice calm and non-threatening, asking if they were all right. The woman looked up, startled, her eyes revealing fear mixed with relief, as if she had been holding herself together by a thread. She explained in fragmented words that the child was sick, that they had come from the hospital, and that the last bus home had already left. She did not ask for money or pity. She simply explained, as though facts alone might somehow fix the situation. He listened, feeling something shift inside him. This was not charity, this was presence. He offered to help them get somewhere warm, to find food, to call for assistance. The woman hesitated, years of disappointment clearly battling the instinct to protect her child at all costs. Eventually, necessity won. She nodded. They moved together through the quiet streets, stopping at a small all-night diner where warmth and light cut through the darkness. He bought soup and tea, watching the color slowly return to the child's face as warmth replaced shivering. The woman spoke sparingly, revealing pieces of her story without self-pity: a recent loss, unstable housing, a city that promised opportunity but delivered isolation. Each detail settled heavily in his chest, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. As the child slept more peacefully, he realized something unsettling. The disappointment of the failed date had vanished completely. In its place was a strange clarity, as if the night had been redirected on purpose. He felt useful, present, and awake in a way he hadn't for years. When they finally left the diner, he arranged a safe ride and made sure they reached temporary shelter, standing outside until he knew they were inside and secure. Walking home alone afterward, he felt changed but didn't yet understand how. He had gone out searching for companionship and returned carrying something heavier and brighter, responsibility mixed with meaning. He slept little that night, thoughts circling around the child's fragile breathing and the woman's quiet strength, wondering why their paths had crossed at that exact moment. He did not yet know that this was only the beginning. Days passed, but the memory refused to fade. He found himself checking his phone not for messages from strangers, but for updates he hoped would come from a life he had briefly touched. Against his usual routine, he reached out to local shelters and aid centers, asking carefully if the woman and child were safe. When he finally received confirmation that they were still struggling but together, something inside him committed fully, without negotiation. This was no longer about helping once, it was about not disappearing like everyone else had. He began visiting regularly, bringing groceries, medicine, and small comforts that made the child smile. He learned how laughter could exist even in uncertainty, how a simple toy could feel like a miracle when resources were scarce. The woman remained cautious but grateful, slowly allowing trust to replace survival-driven suspicion. He never positioned himself as a savior. He simply showed up, again and again, steady and reliable. In helping them, he uncovered parts of himself he thought were gone forever. He woke up with purpose. He worked harder, not from desperation, but from vision. He budgeted, planned, and sacrificed without resentment. The child's health improved, and with it, the woman's strength returned. They spoke about future possibilities, about stability, about rebuilding from ashes. Every small victory felt monumental. Yet challenges persisted. Systems failed them repeatedly. Promises were delayed. Paperwork dragged on. There were nights when progress felt imaginary and exhaustion threatened to undo everything. During those moments, doubt whispered that this responsibility was too heavy, that he had not chosen this life, that it would be easier to walk away. But then the child would laugh, or the woman would quietly express gratitude, and resolve would return stronger than before. He realized something profound during those months. The blind date that never came had not rejected him, it had redirected him. The loneliness that once defined his nights had been replaced by connection deeper than romance, built on trust, care, and shared struggle. He was no longer waiting to be chosen, he was choosing to stay. Opportunities began appearing unexpectedly. A better job offer emerged through a connection made while helping at a community center. Affordable housing became available sooner than anticipated. Piece by piece, stability took shape. The woman found work, regained confidence, and laughed more freely. The child grew stronger, curious, alive. Still, fear lingered. Happiness felt fragile, as if acknowledging it might make it disappear. He learned to hold gratitude gently, without clinging, trusting that whatever force had guided him that night was still at work. The true weight of that night only revealed itself much later, when he stood in a small apartment filled with light and life, watching the child play freely, no longer confined by illness or fear. The woman stood nearby, calmer now, grounded, her resilience transformed into hope. What began as an act of kindness had evolved into something permanent and unbreakable, a chosen family formed not by romance but by purpose. He understood then that God had not ignored his desire for connection, he had simply answered it differently. The love he found was deeper, quieter, and far more enduring than the one he had expected. Through sacrifice, patience, and presence, he became something he had never planned to be: a protector, a guide, a constant. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement keeps stories of hope and humanity alive. Just before we end, leave a comment telling us what this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. The blind date never showed up, but that absence created space for a miracle. And sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as disappointment, waiting for someone brave enough to stay.